Hello, hello, and welcome to Roots and Branches Adoption Stories here on KFred Radio. I'm Janet Monroe. I'm a birth mom, a first mother, a biological mother, a natural mother. I'm a woman who placed her child for adoption in 1970. Today's story is about identity. Most of us never question who we are because we know where we came from. But an adoptee does not have that knowledge. Where does the sense of identity arise from? Or does it play havoc with their lives? Today's guest is Zoe. Her story is unique. Her sense of identity is still unfolding. Zoe, thank you so much for being with us today. I am so happy that you could make it, and I would love to tell your story.
Oh, thank you so much, Janet. Happy to be here.
All right, so let's start at the beginning. I heard you were adopted at 11 days old.
Yes. So, let's start at the beginning. The beginning for my story, believe it or not, starts 15 years before I was even born. So 15 years prior to my birth, my adoptive mom, Carla, was in Wisconsin in graduate school and met good friends, Mark and Judith. And they became fast friends. Mark and Judith moved back to Ithaca, New York, and Carla remained in Wisconsin doing adoption work. And she actually placed a baby boy with Mark and Judith. 15 years later, Carla is a single mom in Rhode Island, wanting to become a parent, approaching her 40th birthday. And Judith is now a social worker doing adoption work in Ithaca, where I was born. So Carla had been waiting and was on exploring different avenues to parenthood, international adoption, domestic adoption. But because she was single and approaching 40, there were restrictions to who would adopt to a single mom or place a child with a single mom. And so she had, she was probably waiting for or exploring this for 3 years. Judith had connected with my birth mom. And from the way I understand this story is literally Judith picked me up at the hospital, brought me home to her living room, where at this point she had 4 children, 2 biological and 2 adoptive. And her partner, Mark, was like, "We are not having a 5th child, Judith, so please find this baby a home." And so she called a few folks, my mom, Carla, being one of them. And Carla called back first. And so Carla went to Ithaca, and the baby boy she had placed with Judith was now 15 years old and was the first person to place me in Carla's arms. So essentially, they cross-placed each other's children, which is pretty serendipitous in it of itself. And so the story goes, Carla brought me home on her birthday, on her 40th birthday. And 3.5 years later, she met my other mom, Gigi. And Gigi really there's an age gap. They're about 15 years apart. Gigi really wanted to become a mother biologically and experience that whole experience, which I completely understand, being a mother myself. And she, at the time, it was very new. Donor conceived people was a whole new phenomenon. And I believe my mom was maybe amongst that first cohort. So she had my little sister, Francesca, via a donor. And then and I should say this part too, ironic, just again, serendipity, Gigi is Italian, dark hair Italian. My little sister, Francesca, also has red hair. So I can't tell, it's faded with my age, but I had really bright red hair. And so that was just like, what is this? So fast forward, I was 7, I believe, and my sister was 2, and they became the first gay couple in the state of Rhode Island to cross-adopt each other's children, so that legally my sister and I had 2 moms. So Gigi adopted me, and Carla adopted my sister, Francesca. And that then set precedent for the state of Massachusetts to have a similar case go through the courts. And from it just kind of opened a floodgate of all these queer families that had to previously choose which one parent was going to be the legal guardian. And now they both could. And then gay marriage, of course, happened years later. But that was really I remember our house was filled with, probably over 200 people celebrating this big milestone for our state and for our family. And I think when we think about identity, for me, I have always had kind of a social justice like fight in me. I always have wanted to stand up for the other and to, I'm also a Libra. I'm very justice oriented. And that having a family of 4 women was a real place of pride for me. And I knew that we were pioneering, that we were on kind of the front lines of something that was still facing a lot of homophobia and, what is homophobia other than being scared of the other? I think there was definitely people were unsure when I went to school. What does that mean? You have 2 moms. And I definitely was faced with friends who would not come over for play dates, not because I was adopted, but because I had 2 moms. And so that added layers to understanding what was going on at the heart of that, and how do I navigate my identity in the face of kind of being othered in multiple ways. But adoption was not how I was not the presenting other at that point in my life.
So when you were at school, you didn't feel that you were picked on because you were adopted. You were maybe looked at differently because you had 2 moms.
Yes, the 2 moms piece. I mean, this was I was probably amongst the first that were cohort in the United States that was going to school with 2 moms. Right this was the late 80s, early 90s. It was not, there were no queer Modern Family on television was not a thing. There were no, Ellen hadn't even come out yet. There was no kind of like social, kind of pop culture references to gay families. And so, the adoption piece was just a fact of my life. The 2 moms piece was where I had to correct Mother's Day, where I had to correct family trees. Adoption was definitely part of that, but it was almost buried underneath having 2 moms. Which, by the way, also for me, I remember, we went to the March on Washington in the early 90s, and it was a million people march in Washington for gay rights. And I had on a t-shirt that said like, I heart my moms, or I heart my mommies, or something like that. And our family got on a subway car, and people kind of took a glance, and then the entire subway car erupted in applause. And those for me were like I was probably 6 or 7, but those were these identity moments where like, yes, there were moments of awkwardness or hardship around homophobia from my peers, but there were also these like core memories where you are just bursting with like pride over this response from the public kind of applauding what you're standing for just by existing in the family you're in. So and I remember too, one person said to me, I was maybe in like 3rd grade, "Hey, I heard you have 2 moms." And I said, "Yes, so," in this kind of defensive way as I could do. And they said, "Well, you must have really good food in your house." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I do." So sometimes the response was, people wished they had 2 moms because maybe their father figure was not the warmest or kindest to them. And they had in their minds like, oh, 2 moms like meant you had good food and a lot of love, which is true in my case.
So do you think having 2 moms made you stronger?
Oh, for sure. For sure. I think 2 moms, and the 2 moms that I had, right, can't speak for all 2 mom families, but I feel there was, both my moms come from education and social work backgrounds. So communication was really very present always. We would talk about and talk through anything. And I feel that played a big role in my self-confidence, my ability to come and tell them what I was going through, work through anything that was hard. And still, as I've gotten older, I've understood this long view of adoption identity. And I see myself through a lens when I listen to other adult adoptee narratives around perfectionism, the good adoptee, the overachiever, the proving kind of always needing to kind of prove your self-worth or your belonging through your achievements. I look back on my life and I could like point to many instances of that where I embodied that. I became the good communicator my moms were, in part because they set the stage for that, but also because I had something to prove in that relationship. I think I didn't understand at the time that that's what was going on, but I'm fascinated recently with this idea of the long view we have on our developmental milestones as adopted people. At 10, at 16, I couldn't have had maybe the developmental standpoint of reflection of why I was an overachiever or why I felt I needed to mimic or belong in certain circles that my parents were in. But I can look back now that I'm actually approaching my 40th birthday and see, I don't know if that was my authentic self or if I was masking and becoming what mirrored them. For better or for worse, I think that played a role in all my successes that I've had over my life thus far. It's a double-edged sword. It's like, great, you achieved a lot. And also, I am really crappy at just existing. Like, I do not do well with relaxation and just being chill. I need to be doing. And that, I think, is part of my adoptee identity. Yeah.
When you were growing up, did you have questions about your adoption that you could ask your mums and they would answer them honestly, or would they kind of skirt around things, or did they just answer age appropriately, or how did it go? Because I'm sure you had questions, especially with having two mums. And actually, in actual fact, you had three mums.
Yeah, I know, right? Actually, and I collect moms now. I have a mother-in-law, and I had like a third mom growing up who was very much like an auntie part of my life. So my adoption story with this family in Ithaca, to put it into context, we would go spend Thanksgiving in Ithaca with this family every year. So my adoption story and my connection to this family and my origin story, if you will, was like very much a part of like my bedtime routine, telling the moments of, 15-year-old placing you when you were like, that was always part of my story. And again, told from a place of serendipity and joy and the happiest day of my mom's life. It took me to the long view where I am today to recognize the science behind early childhood brain development, that very special, most important, best day of Carla's life was a very vulnerable day in my life. I had never had that perspective shared with me, right? It was there was open book, honesty and would you like to have a relationship? Like they would have done anything I wanted in terms of reunion. And in fact, my birth mother wrote letters for the first couple of years. So there was this element of open adoptionness, and my birth father didn't know I existed when I was placed for adoption and ended up trying to get full custody a few months after I had already been adopted, but was coached, I think, well, by a public defender who helped him navigate relinquishment of his rights, but got visitation. So I did have a window into some biology and somewhat of a relationship there. It was very open to how much or how little I wanted. I feel like my parents, again, would have welcomed anything that I was expressing. There was no secrecy. There was no shame around it. My feelings were normalized. What I think we missed was the seed was never planted for me to understand what was going on in my body, whether I wanted to kind of even like admit it or not. It's just science. The relinquishment, the separation from a birth mother's heartbeat, her scent, the sound of her voice, a baby is hardwired to be looking for that birth mother. And when that separation occurs, there is a physical cellular change in fight or flight response for that infant. And I think I could have, because I'm so analytical or intellectual, I could have benefited from that science to better understand my mind and body connection. So I had different moments in my life where my body would keep the score. I would have an autoimmune response when I went to college. When my mom, Carla, who actually passed away 12 years ago, when she got diagnosed with cancer, I had an autoimmune response. When she died, my body broke out in chronic hives for 2 years. My brain, my intellectual self, went back to work. I kept achieving. I kept moving. My body was saying, red alert, an abandonment has happened again. Like you need to pay attention to your body, and take care of yourself. And I think as an adoptee, that mind body connection got severed somewhere along the way. And my protective survival hat told me to live in my head. But your body doesn't adhere to those commands. Your body does what it needs to do. And so I feel like in my long view of adoption and identity, which is like, long, not so long, I'm 39, I've recognized how adoption has impacted me from my personality to also like my body keeping the score, and that it is a road of recovery, of reconnection to yourself, of somatic healing practices, and maybe talk therapy. But that talk therapy for me only gets me so far because the trauma is actually in my body. And it's pre-language, right? It happens before we have the ability to talk about it or process it. And that I think makes it nuanced and complicated for many adoptees who are infant adoptees, in understanding how their identity has been shaped or formed.
You knew all along that you were adopted.
Oh, yes.
So you were able to navigate that. How do you feel that people should know at the beginning that they're adopted, or do you think it should come no later, or how do you feel about that?
Oh, you should always know. You should always know. I think the literature tells us you should always know, and it is my personal opinion.
I know. I was talking to a gentleman the other day who found out at age 52 that he was adopted.
That's hard. Mm-hmm.
That changed a lot for him.
Mm-hmm. I think it changes a lot. Yeah.
But he said that it was the right timing. If it had happened earlier, then he might not have had the resources to find out what he did. Or if it happened later, he wouldn't have the people around. So again, he felt that everything happens at the right time.
I'm glad that worked out for him. Yeah, I think it is a spectrum. I think every adoptee has, we're always making meaning of our lives. And I think in some cases, what occurs when it happens, and to be able to accept that in that moment and find peace in that finding out at 50 something was the right thing for him. Wonderful. I think a lot of late discovery adoptees are very angry and feel they've lived, feel like there's been something missing that they could have filled a puzzle piece earlier, is what I have heard in across some narratives. But there's also the narratives like the gentleman you just referenced. I mean, it's a spectrum. We only know our story. But I do feel that best practice for adoptive parents is, the psychologists are saying, tell your child. Your child should know they're adopted.
Do you think adoptive parents should have more training as regards to the trauma that the child is going to go through, an adoptive child will go through, and the questions that they ask?
I think, yes, I think absolutely. And I think starting from a scientific place of what biologically is happening in utero, like hardwired for connection to that birth mother, and then thinking about what happens when that voice is gone, that smell is gone, that child is having to reattach to another person. It is not to say that that attachment can't be beautiful, but we have to acknowledge that a separation occurred. And that when we don't acknowledge that, I think the ripple effect is real. The research around ambiguous loss, which I think is what adoption is. It is the, psychological understanding that you have a birth parent or a birth mother out in the world, but the physical presence is missing. There is no fix to the ambiguous loss, but the way to mitigate its impact as it relates to depression and anxiety and other mental health challenges is to acknowledge it. So I think we underestimate the power of acknowledging that it is a spectrum, acknowledging that there might be really complex and nuanced tug and pull feelings that adoptees have around their identity, around holidays, around their birthday, around Mother's Day. And just that acknowledgement, not trying to solve for it, but just the acknowledgement goes a long way. And so I think, sometimes we are fearful of hard topics, so we don't talk about them. We don't trust that our relationships are strong enough that they can get through hard things. But I think it's really important I think it strengthens the relationship between anybody, whether it be your spouse or your parent or your child, when you can lean into that curiosity, and allow for people to have whatever feelings they're having. Secrets, I don't ever think serve people well.
Yeah, there is more talk today for adoptive parents and adoptees, but back in my day, there wasn't. And so an adoptee was taught to be grateful to the adoptive parents. And therefore, they would go through feelings where they don't want to ask questions because they're afraid they're going to hurt the adoptive parents. Mm-hmm. Yet they hold it within, and therefore that trauma is experienced in a different way, maybe by rebelling or things like that. That is still going to upset the adoptive parents no matter what they do, right? The adoptive parents are going to be upset because the children are not conforming to what they think they should be, based on the fact that when they were given this baby, they were told that this was their child and treat it like their child, and everything was going to be hunky-dory for the whole life, but it doesn't work that way.
It does not work that way. And I think we really need more of a public awareness, public health, maybe campaign around babies are not blank slates, right? Like, you come with a blueprint of your DNA, and nature and nurture are interplayed, right? Like it's not an either or, it's an interplay. They affect each other. But a baby is not a blank slate. And when you are adopting with the premise that they are, you're setting yourself up for some really hard moments, for both you and that child. And the baby is also not going to replace maybe a lost pregnancy. The baby is also not going to, we somehow have shifted from, I don't know that we were ever really there, but we should be finding homes for children, not finding children for homes, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And I think that's where, recent literature that has come out, like American Baby and Relinquished, and do excellent jobs of kind of challenging this privilege of parenthood, and leaning into curiosity around, like, how do we form families, and how, and I'm not sure what the right answer is, but I do know that using children to plug and play places is without real consideration for listening to adoptee voices, or the people who are donor conceived as they grew up, listening to their voices, that is a real miss. We have to be centering the narratives of the people with lived experience, who are now adults with that long view, to better inform and prepare people who want to become parents through different avenues, so that, nothing's ever going to be perfect, but so that we're at least talking through the hard things, because I think the silence is deadly. And I think the shame is also.
Yeah, definitely more talk. You talked about becoming a mother in 2016 and that changing your life.
Yes. Oh, yes, as it does. As it does. Yeah. So I only have one child. She was 10 and a half pounds when she was born. So, there was that. I think that's, that was an experience. And of course, my need for control adopted self did that with no drugs. and and that was also an experience. But yeah, that was life changing. That was a game changer for me as an adoptee. I grew up with adopted friends who remained my best friends throughout my life, and so I was really lucky to, when I was going through kind of what is this feeling and what are all these like emotions that were surfacing. When I went home postpartum with Rowan, my daughter, I was, with every milestone of like how your body changes postpartum to like milk coming in, I was thinking in the back of my head, my birth mother also experienced these postpartum responses in her body, but there was no baby, right? There was constantly this like shift in my head of, wow, isn't this so magical and bonding and primal in all these like really intense ways, and your hormones are just flooding. And then on the other side, I'd be thinking, oh, and that's where this empathy for my birth mom came from. Like, whoa, she went through all of this, but there was no child. Like, that's intense. And my friends who were adopted all became social workers. So that also was this, I was able to go, and they're like, well, Zoe, adoption is actually, the act of separation is a trauma. And I, of course, sat back, Janet, was like, I'm not traumatized. And my friend, like, with her therapeutic self, looked at me and just went, okay. And just let it sit. And that's really what sparked I need to go listen to all the adoptee voices and narratives on podcasts. I need to go reread the books sitting on my bookshelf. I need to look at this through a new lens, because I'm missing something. And then, of course, I was able to, it was a hard journey, but, acknowledge like something did happen to me and it did change me. And I don't like to admit that because it feels vulnerable, but of course it's true. And I feel more grounded in my identity and able to show up in my full self, to conversations, in my life, when I can kind of hold space for all of that nuance and complexity and, sometimes hot mess of big feelings that comes along with it. Because otherwise I'm suppressing it. Otherwise it's there whether I want to admit it or not, but I'm just like tucking it away and not dealing with it. And when we tuck away feelings and don't deal with them, they bubble up somewhere, somehow. And so motherhood really changed that for me. And the genetic mirroring that I was faced with also was a big moment where I was looking at my daughter, and all the time now, right? Like she's going to be 10. We're out and about and people are like, oh my God, that's your twin, right? We look a lot alike. And I found that to be comforting and beautiful. And at the same time, I was reckoning with the fact that I missed out on that my whole life. So I don't think we understand the power of genetic mirroring until we're experiencing it. And then all of a sudden we're recognizing how much we missed out on. Or maybe some adoptees I've heard felt it their whole life. They knew they were missing it their whole life. It was very present for them. I think that's probably very true in particularly transracial or intercountry adoptive families. Like you are aware that someone, that your family is not mirroring you back to yourself. I knew that, but I didn't live with the pain of it so much. As when I had my daughter, I was really like, wow, this is some powerful stuff. And oh wait, I didn't have this my whole life. Like something was missing. And then meeting my half sister and having those kind of reunions. We don't know each other very well. Like, we don't or don't talk every day. That's not but there is a genetic mirroring that is very much present, that I'm aware of, that this person feels very familiar to me, or familial. Yeah. And that all that came from becoming a mom.
Did you find when you met your half sister that you had a lot of things that were in common?
We have some core things that are in common. We have, a real love for the outdoors and nature. We stand in a similar way. We have our tone of voice is similar. I'm also really aware that we grew up in very different environments, and that molded us in different ways. There's definitely some core um, there's some core similarities, and you know I've seen the world in a way that she hasn't, and simply about access. Growing up where I grew up on the east side of Providence, with parents who had graduate degrees, with a family that sent me to summer camp every year, with like all these experiences compounded. And I find that that does create a challenge for connection. That I almost there's a barrier of just education and experience, and topics of interest because of the environment, that there's similarities that I can point to, and then there's also like hard finding common ground, if that makes sense.
So nature versus nurture.
Yeah, and that there's both are present. Both
Would
are
you
present.
say it's like a 50-50?
For me, and again, I feel like this is different for everyone. It's hard because I don't know how much of who I am was shifted and molded because of my environment, and how much truly, like, the love for nature and the affinity to kind of feel at home in the woods or by the ocean, I think is like in my DNA, right? My love for like talking. I know my biological grandmother from my birth father's side. I still have a relationship with that. We love to talk. Like, I can totally see different places but it all blends together in a way. Like and I don't know how much of my who I am nature wise was dialed up because I got to go to college, because I then went and got a PhD, because I went to camps that were in Europe when I was 14. Like, I had these incredible experiences that took my nature and my foundation and then exploded it into blossoming in all the ways it could blossom. And I think that the foundation is there, the potential is always there, but the environment allows for things to either flourish or feel like, or not. That's how I feel like the way I think about it is the blueprint of a house, like the architectural design is you're born with. And then what gets poured in, what foundation in the house, what furniture gets put around helps you grow. And I feel like, upstate New York, rural poverty is hard. It's hard. And the ways in which I believe when I look at my half sister, the ways in which I think she could grow and blossom, she is blossoming. She's incredible, and she hasn't seen the world, and I know she wants to, right? So there's this, like, the travelers inside of her, but how, I just had an environment that gave me the plane ticket and the love and the like all the other stuff. It's not just material. It's all the other poured in communication stuff, but access mattered to turn on, experiences that lit me up, that helped me explore what I wanted to be in the world. So yeah, It's both and. I don't know a percentage to answer your question. I think it's all muddled. Um, I don't know. It's clear cut.
It depends on the individual, I think,
Yeah.
and the family, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. And I think that there are pieces, where that the access to resources for my half sister at least doesn't matter at all. Like her children are incredible. She's doing an incredible job as a mom with not like, with nature. She's using what she has. And that to me is so beautiful to see because that is a reflection of like, I am an entrepreneur. I do a lot of those things like, so that who knows, is that nature or that nurture? I don't know.
Yeah, my son was an entrepreneur, and that was from nature because his mom and dad always wanted him to have a steady job with the government, where he'd get his
Yep.
paycheck every week, and but that wasn't his. That was not his nature.
No. And I also feel that I got placed in a environment that was very simpatico to me. So I think about adoption as like, if we think about gardening, nature, like grafting, and you're taking one plant or one vine and you're trying to connect it to another and like grow like a lemon and lime tree at the same time. And sometimes that really works and you graft and you are different, but you're thriving with the same root system. Or you're thriving off of like the same plant that got grafted. And other times that grafting just isn't the right graft. Like it's an oil and water mix. The personalities are two very different types of forests or trees. I feel like I naturally, nature, am very aligned with my two moms and their personalities. And so I feel lucky for that. I adapted to that. I grew into fit there as well. But I've had other friends in adoption scenarios where it is, budding, it's hard. There's not that synergy of personality between the adoptee and the adoptive family. Like there's just different energy levels people bring. And mine is very in tune. And I don't know if that is just who I am or if I made that happen. See, this is the problem, Janet. We talk about identity. It's like, I have no idea.
We make things happen, Zoe. We make things
Yeah.
happen. So tell me, after your daughter came, then you started doing more research into yourself and your identity.
Yes. And I started doing a deeper dive and the part of me that is all about kind of solving the problems, connecting the dots, and a pursuit for justice really found that there was no framework or common language that was not overly academic and not overly clinical that could speak to the lived experiences and everyday moments for an adult adoptee to better understand themselves. And so I really wanted, I wanted almost like a card a day to just help me reflect on my identity. So something like embracing and you can feel both grateful for your adoptive family and mourn the loss of not knowing your biology, something like that. And so that idea was the start of what is now unfolding, that we learn more about ourselves through the storytelling of others. So very much what you're doing here. And that we need access to reflection on our own and prompts, sometimes conversation prompts to start the dialogue that might be that hard conversation with our village. And sometimes coming up with those conversation prompts on your own feels too vulnerable. And so having a reflection card or a journal entry or listening to someone else's brief story helps to start those engagements. And that's really how unfolded came to be. It started, we have a physical conversation card deck. And when we realized that needed to go to scale, that's when it became an app.
All right. So explain the app.
So the app is is right now on the Apple App Store and will soon be on Google Play. It is a daily flow of a conversation card, a journal prompt that goes along with that conversation card, and a grounding breathwork exercise. And in about 2 weeks, we will also have community flows. So those will be curated 5 days in a row of daily flows from an adoptee or someone connected to adoption in the world who's kind of taking you through a mini flow story arc over 5 days. So the point there is that visibility is a game changer. And I really want to have folks be able to see adoptees who are in academia, adoptees who are CEOs, adoptees who are celebrities, adoptees who are podcasts. Like, we are everywhere. And I feel like that belonging to a community and hearing and trying on other people's stories is really important to our own identity development. So Unfolding will have has the daily flow and then community flows. You can switch persona. So those card messages that come in your daily flow can be, right now, everything is defaulted to the adoptee perspective, because that's really who we're centering in this, that myself and my co-founder, Ellie, we are both adoptees. That's where this heartbeat is. But we recognize that the village could really benefit from having a window into our experiences as well. And we exist in the context of our village. So that was really important for us. So you can right now toggle to an audience of adoptive parent, if that's who you were in the app. We're going to add more personas, more audiences, if you will. But we started with those two. And I'll say the way in which we are thinking about the app in the world is for individuals to download themselves, but also to use as an extension of clinical care. So there's a lot of adoptees in the world who are in therapy and find that the therapist is not adoption competent. So really using the app as a place for common language and to start conversations rooted in the lived experience narratives of adult adoptees. That has come through. The app has been live for like maybe 3 weeks now. And that has been a real feedback loop for us, is that folks who are in the family support ecosystem, the child welfare world, are seeing Unfolding as a tool to use in their practice. And we're excited to explore that. And the other piece is, looking at Unfolding being offered as an employee benefit. So really branching into the spaces where adoptees might not be seeking out the podcasts that are, in the adoption community. They are just existing, which I think is the majority. I think that there's a sliver of the population that is out seeking resources. Most adoptees I meet, when I say, "Hi, nice to meet you, I'm Zoe, I'm an adoptee," have not connected with other adoptees. They don't yet see themselves as part of a larger community of adopted people. And I think that is a loss. I think that they should know there are access to resources. And so through the community flows, I'm hoping to microdose, if you will, folks who are in the adoption ecosystem, so that there is people can go and find more and do deeper dives if they want, but they're getting kind of a taste of different folks and their work through the app that might be more mainstream in the employee benefits world than if you were off trying to find it on your own.
How does the app help with people that are trying to understand both loss and gratitude, and both joy and anger about their situations?
Yes. The app is very non-prescriptive. We're not a clinical app. We're not trying to tell people how to feel, because I don't think that's helpful, nor do I think there is really, again, like something to fix. There is simply acknowledgments and reflection to have, and for people to move at their own pace through their own journeys. our cards are meant to have relevance to someone or not. Some might not be some, for example, one just might say birthdays and then have a reflection on like what comes up for you on your birthday. And someone might say, my birthdays are great. I love my birthday. Nothing happened. Like, wonderful. Other people might need to reflect and say, my birthday is really hard for me, or I get sick on my birthday every year. My immune system goes down, like, or nobody understands why I would set like the nuance of this day for me. We have purposely kept the messages so that it's always encouraging curiosity and self-reflection and conversation, but that they're not prescriptive. So they are derived, the framework is derived from the literature and from patterns that we have observed over narratives that are out in the world from folks with lived experience. But people will interpret as they will.
What did you and Ellie experience by building this?
So much. It's been a real journey. I think that there's what I feel I have personally really gained is every member of the adoptee community that I have met who, by means of wanting to collaborate or think about how we get the word out there for unfolding, there has been this kinship that has occurred even over Zoom calls. Like, I feel like I have just expanded my village times 100 people. It has been, I think the biggest kind of takeaway from this is, or lesson that we keep experiencing over and over again, is that this is needed in the world. The meeting adoptees out in random networking events who have said to me, they immediately pull out their phone, start like, what is it called? Because they said, there's nothing for us. There's nothing for us. There is, of course, if you want to, go and listen to the podcasts, and there are people who love podcasts, I'm sure you have listeners who really tune in, and this is a lifeline for them. There's a lot of people who are just moving through life quickly and, are struggling with like, what can I have? That's a tap, a reflection. Okay. And now I move on through my day. And so that has been the fact that we're creating something that has not been created. So we're not stepping on someone else's toes, and we're honoring the hard work that everyone has put into this for decades, like working and still working to pass the laws and create more resources and write the memoirs and advance the narrative. It feels really wonderful to be contributing something meaningful to the ecosystem. And that has just been, something Ellie and I have just, we went to a conference together, and this was a conference for college mental health professionals. So not adoption related. And on our table, adoptee identity, and we're talking about the cards, and we had people crying at our table. They had never seen anything for adoption or adoptees named in the college mental health space. And they were coming to our table as their husband was adopted, their children were adopted, they were adopted, their mom was adopted, and it was bringing up such big feelings, just even feeling seen. And so I go back to that importance of acknowledgement, right? That like, I'm a big believer that when something is real, you feel, you get the goosebumps, you feel that there is like something is happening. And something is happening when adoptees, people connected to adoption, feel that identity is being acknowledged. And I'm really excited. Like, that was over a year ago, that conference. And just thinking about the impact that unfolding as an app that can go to scale can have for people feeling seen for once, brings me great joy.
I understand that app is only available in the US.
Right now, it is only available in the US. We have a growing list of countries who have requested the app, Canada being one of them. It is definitely a priority on our to-do list, probably early 2027. will be
Okay.
expanded.
I am on the second Tuesday of every month. I have a meeting in an evening of guests from my show that come on, and I'd really like you to come on the next one and go over the app with them, because it would probably be beneficial for them. One of the gentlemen, Mike, is a foster dad for many kids, and something like that would probably help him and the kids that he takes care of and looks after and
Of
knows.
course.
So I think it could be something beneficial for everybody to know, everybody in my little community, which is expanding rapidly. Thank you. But that's what I feel that Roots and Branches is all about. It's people coming on and being able to tell their stories, tell their truths the way they believe it, and find their identities. And it just helps people heal.
Absolutely.
That's the most important thing. So where do you see unfolding?
Where do I see unfolding? I right now we are building up our community flows of guest, guest speakers and I guess guest flows would be what I would call it. And so that's we'll see how that unfolds. I'm going, we're on podcasts, we're getting in the news, we're going to see how this unfolds. I'm not quite sure, Janet, how it will all unfold. But I'm excited for the journey ahead, and yeah.
What are your goals for it?
My goal right now is to expand the awareness of it. I think that when people are in the know, they know someone who's adopted, they are adopted, they're connected to the constellation of adoption in some way, or a professional who works with adoptees. And my hope is that people are the ripple effect, that they, reach out to the people in their lives. My goal is that people who are connected to adoption feel they are actively part of a bigger community, and that no adoptee feels isolated. I think that is the big goal, is for unfolding to be part of healthcare, for it to be part of employee benefits, for it to be part of child welfare and public health initiatives, so that we are, acknowledging and seeing the challenges that are connected to identity for adult adoptees and doing something about it. This all started for me when I learned the statistics around suicide and substance use and overrepresentation in mental health services for adult adoptees, and my mind was blown. How could that be true, and there be this little of a public health response?
It's amazing once you start talking adoption to people, how many people are in that adoption constellation, right? Either they know someone or are related to someone, or it's just this ever expanding constellation.
I mean, they say 6 out of 10 people have a direct connection to adoption. Is the Donaldson Institute stat?
That's
60% of the population.
I was blown away when I would start talking about it to people, and then they'd come, "Oh, I'm adopted," and
all the time. And you find that when you start introducing yourself as connected to the adoption world, that's where you start to go, "Oh my goodness, like we are everywhere."
We are
everywhere.
Okay, so thank you very much, Zoe. I really appreciate you being on today. I'm glad you're talking about your unfolding. Where do they find the app? On Apple, you said?
Yep, you can find the app on Apple, and our website is unfolding-app.com. You can learn more there.
Zoe said something near the end of our conversation that stayed with me. We are everywhere. Adoptees are everywhere. Birth parents are everywhere. Adopted parents, the brothers, sisters, grandparents, spouses, children. Adoption creates branches that reach much further than we sometimes realize. But what I hear most clearly from Zoe today is that adoption is not simply an event that happened when a child was 11 days old. It continues to unfold. It can unfold when that child starts school, when they look in a mirror and wonder who they resemble, when they lose a parent, when they meet a biological sibling, or when they become a parent themselves and perhaps for the first time look into the face of someone who looks like them. And maybe identity isn't something we simply find. Maybe it's something that we continue discovering throughout our lives. And that is what makes unfolding so meaningful. It was created by adoptees for adoptees, by people who understand many of these questions because they have lived them themselves. Zoe and her co-founder Ellie didn't create something that tells adoptees how they should feel. They created a place that encourages curiosity, reflection, and conversation. A place where adoptees can explore what they are feeling and know they are not alone. Because sometimes an adoptee may feel gratitude and loss, love and anger, joy and sadness, belonging, and still have questions about where they came from. There needs to be room for all of it. That's why these stories need to be told. Not so whether we can decide whether adoption is good or bad, happy or sad, but so that we can listen to the people who have actually lived it. Zoe's identity is still unfolding. And through it, the unfolding app that she and Ellie are creating, a space where adoptees can explore their own stories in their own time and in their own way. Thank you, Zoe, for sharing your story and for reminding us that no adoptee should have to navigate those questions alone. I'm Janet, and this has been Roots and Branches on KFred Radio. Until next time, remember, every adoption has roots, every life it touches creates branches, and every identity deserves the space to unfold.